Hey guys, so I had a pre-taped intro for today's pre-taped interview, which was conducted before stay-at-home orders were enacted. But upon reviewing the footage that you're about to see, I found myself feeling called to tape another introduction because the political climate that we're in today has changed dramatically since the taping of this interview. But in a way, the themes of this interview I have found for myself to be ever more pertinent. The interview that you're about to watch today is the longest that I have had so far in this series, and it's for a good reason. And it's simply because I didn't want this interview to end. So let me tell you about today's guest. Her name is Kelsi Sheren, and when she was 18, she enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces, where she would spend the next 4 years training for and serving on the front lines as an artillery gunner. In the summer of 2009, she was deployed to Afghanistan, where she would witness firsthand the high human cost of war. And it was here she would witness many of her friends lose their lives or sustain injuries that would change the course of their lives forever. In 2011, Kelsi would sustain one such injury herself. She was sent home with severe PTSD and a ruling that deemed her medically unfit for future employment. At the time, she was just 22 years old. Lost and confused, Kelsi began to turn to art therapy, and in 2014, her company, Brass and Unity, was born. So picture this: fine jewelry made from empty bullet casings and a commitment to supporting veterans worldwide through each sale. What started on Kelsi's kitchen table years ago has now blossomed into a globally loved brand on a mission. If you'll do me the honor of joining me for the entire interview, I hope that the resounding message for you is that whatever pain you might be feeling right now, whatever suffering you might be feeling right now or seeing your community experience, when you advance into the grieving process far enough, you will eventually find yourself at a point where you see that where there's pain, on the flip side, there's an opportunity for change. And I hope that you will see that you have agency to participate in this change. When I see somebody like Kelsi, I see a mom, I see a wife, I see a woman who's not even 5 years older than me, but yet, and she has a disability. She wakes up each and every single day committed to the cause that gives her purpose, the cause that helps channel her pain or gives weight and meaning to the pain that she has felt and continues to see within her community every single day. She has turned her pain into purpose. And not every single one of us will start companies like Brass and Unity. We'll all be able to do different things, and whatever that thing is will look entirely differently to us. But there's something that I find so moving listening to these interviews, chatting with the guests that I've been able to chat with, especially today's guest, Kelsi. For me personally, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, it has just been a huge honor and something that I continue to find strength in for myself. And I hope that this is something that you will also find strength in as well. With that, I welcome Kelsi Sheren to the show. Kelsi.
Yes, darling.
You are somebody who wears a number of different hats. You've just written a book. You're a veteran, you're a mom, a wife. This is probably the worst question to begin on, but
No.
How would you introduce yourself?
That's really, that's like,
Tell me about yourself.
Well, yeah, I definitely am. I do wear a multitude of hats, but I think that every hat has its own chapter of my life, or it is attached to its own part of my life, really. And so I don't necessarily introduce myself as one thing. I never really have. And so I just, all of that, I'm Kelsi. I do start with, I'm the CEO of Brass and Unity. And I'm a veteran. And then when they have any other questions, I kind of trail off. I'm also a mom. I'm also a wife. I'm an entrepreneur. You know, I'm a few things. But those are the big ones I start with. I guess I can start saying author now.
Would you say that the public part of your story sort of begins when you were 18 and you made the decision to enlist in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that was the turning point in my life, in the catalyst to really drive me where I am now. That was in 2007. I graduated high school, and I left and joined the military after attending college and realizing it really wasn't for me. I met this really amazing lady on a bus, and she was a veteran on Remembrance Day, and she was this just incredible human. You could just tell she had stories upon stories to tell. And I was asking her about why she joined and why she did what she did, and she just told me her story, and it was so fascinating and just so incredible to me that I ended up leaving college that day and joining the military the next day. So I turned 18 about a month before I joined. Or right after, I turned 18 a month before I joined. Yeah, that's right. And then right after that, I went into training.
What was the process of sort of getting screened and applying?
So within the Canadian military, I can't speak for every country in NATO, but within the Canadian military, we have a different type of screening process. Like, it's not depends on what you're going for, what job you're trying to achieve. For example, if you want to be a pilot, right off the bat, you have to be like within a certain height range and certain vision score and everything like that. So I knew I wasn't going to be a pilot because I'm too short. So I was interested in a few different fields. It was the Army, artillery, and infantry. And I was more interested in that because it was more of the front lines role. And that's what I personally wanted to do. So it was a medical test, a couple exams, and a clearance, and then off we went. It was really that quick.
That is so cool. So prior to the taping of this conversation that we're having now, we were talking about sort of the relatively recent changes to the U.S. Policy.
Yes.
When it comes to women serving on the front lines in the military. And it sounds like for you here in Canada, enrolling, and then within a month being like fully immersed in that process. What was that like?
Well, I've always been raised to believe that it didn't matter, as cliche as that sounds, what I wanted to do, female or not. So I never saw that as a barrier in my life. I was never exposed to any sort of, and maybe now looking back, microaggressions, small, like little things that maybe I would have noticed now, knowing the culture, like understanding what that means to be looked at differently because you're a woman. But back when I was younger, I'm 30 now, so, not a crazy amount of time ago, but back when I was younger, I just never was exposed to that. You can't do it because you're a woman culture. So, for me, going into the training aspect and being fully immersed, I just assumed if you could carry your weight, that you could do the job. That being said, in the United States, that's a little bit of a different conversation. They've never, up until very recently, had women attempt to do the training or the requirements to become a U.S. Marine, or I think they've had Marine women, but certain jobs, I don't know their full extent of where they've had women into their ranks. But I do know that there are certain jobs women still, I think, are now just being allowed to try, but no one has passed through. I think there was one woman who had passed through for the infantry training. I think it was Ranger training. I'm not 100%, but she had passed a little bit through a portion of it. I think it's still kind of ongoing, to be honest, because their training takes a little bit longer depending on the job. So that being said, women there are just now kind of getting a taste of what Canada has been. We haven't always been allowed, I do believe, to do the jobs that I used to do, but fairly recently, like, we're ahead of the curve, I think, for the militaries. Yeah.
Who was the woman you met on the bus who inspired you?
I don't know her name.
Oh.
It was the weirdest thing. It wasn't even that she inspired me. It was so much more than that. Like, she's a full chapter in my book. Like she was this woman that was the turning point in my life. She was just this older veteran. She was in Air Force uniform. She had a whole row of medals, and she was like one of the first pilots that was allowed to fly. And she was just incredible. Just the air about her that just, I guess that badassness is what I would call it. She just had it.
Do you think if you saw her, you would recognize her?
I would like to think that. I don't think she's probably alive anymore. She was quite old when I met her. But I would like to think that I would feel some type of connection with her.
Isn't it crazy how like some of the most impactful people in your life are people who have had such a small, you know, in terms of like chronological time, such a small part of your life?
Yeah, I do. You don't know it at the time, and I think that's also the beauty of it is you don't necessarily know what is going to change your life or how it's going to change your life or who's going to affect your life. It's like a hindsight, right? If I only knew that person, I would have taken a picture. I would have called them. I would have got their number. But I think that's also kind of the cool thing because it gives you that moment to sit back and reflect and look at that and also realize that person was that effective in your life or that had that much change, momentum in your life.
Was there any point in the military in which you were like, what am I doing? I'm 18, 19, 20. Most of my peers are in school, sort of like walking a more conventional path. And I know you just mentioned that you don't like to think of yourself as a female.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in the way that I think where I grew up is a really tiny town. And the way that my parents were always with me was never, I was in soccer really young. I started fighting in Taekwondo at 4. So it just was, I was always kind of in that realm of if you can do it, then do it. It was never like, that's the boys are playing over there. You don't go play soccer with the boys, you play with the girls. Or you don't, if you want to play rugby, if you want to practice with the boys, you can practice with the boys. If you can hang with the boys, boys hit harder, but like that kind of thing. It was never like the guys are playing over there. You can't involve yourself.
Right.
No, I just was never exposed.
So when you were in it, did you carry that mentality with you all the way through? I
think I carry that mentality with me now still because even with everything going on, I know there are plenty of people out there that have maybe experienced, a negative reaction from the world because they're a woman and for no other reason other than that. I've had some of it, but nothing that I've been very fortunate in that I have never been, I'll say scarred by it or I had it in the military, but I try to not think of it that way. I just try to blow it off my shoulders and.
Do you think it was sort of a coping mechanism
for
you in the military, just to ignore and because I would imagine if you actually allowed yourself to take the time to process everything,
I don't know, it'd be good.
Every slight and everything, it just would be a lot.
I think it would be infuriating, and I think it would be all-consuming, and I don't want to give that time that negative energy any sort of place in my life. And I think that you hold the keys to your own happiness, and a lot of that is the way that you choose to perceive the world and how you choose to perceive everything that's around you. And that's not to say that it's right that I ignore it. It's not that I'm trying to ignore it. I think that my life is much more peaceful and much calmer and much happier when I choose to focus on the things that are positive. And I try really hard. Like I said, I haven't been, knock on wood, I've been very fortunate, walking down the streets. I don't feel unsafe. And that's because I feel like I can handle myself.
Right.
So I think I'm not sympathetic towards women. I just think that I have never had that mentality or have had to experience it on that level. So I choose to perceive it as in, if that's how somebody feels that day and that makes them feel better, well, great, you do you, bro. But I am not going to feed into it. I'm not going to read into it. I'm going to keep going about my day, and I'm going to focus on the happy things that I was about to go do before you decided to catcall me when I walk down the street or be a total creep.
Right. You served a tour in Afghanistan.
I did.
So Do you think you could tell us a little bit more about your experience?
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, the 4 years that you were in the military.
Yeah.
I'm someone who I don't know much about the military. Don't
Okay.
know how it works.
Yeah, I can totally, yeah, that's no problem at all. So when you join, you go through a screening process, like I said, and then you get told what type of job, and then you get a job offer, and then you swear in. Once you're sworn in, then you're like the government's property at that point. You're a number now, and you have a number, and you abide by your number. And then you get a phone call waiting to find out when you're going to go off to basic training. And that takes place in Saint-Jean, Quebec. All military, like when you get in, you go there. Mm-hmm. And then after that it's 12 or 13 weeks, I don't know exactly what it is right now, of basic intro, like learning to march, learning to walk and talk, and everything about the military, the basics you learn. After you graduate that, if you graduate that, because you don't always, some people don't, right? There's a lot of people who fail out or they voluntarily release. So that's not to say that everybody makes it through, that's for sure. Then you go off to the specific type of trades training that you were hired for. Mm-hmm. So me being artillery, I was hired to go and do a certain type of job, and that type of job is only possible to train for in certain areas. So I got posted to Gagetown, New Brunswick, and because there's lots of open land there to shoot live rounds that go quite a distance. So once you get there, you start another course, and these courses consist of, yelling, getting yelled at, getting screamed at, getting, doing push-ups and no sleep, and, the stereotype of exactly what you think: push-ups, sit-ups, carry a lot of weight, not a lot of sleep, in barracks, that sort of thing. And then you do your weapons training, which is you learn how to fire all the weapons in the military, how to clean them, how to use them safely, how to load them, all of that. And then you graduate from all of your training, and depending on the type of job you have, you could be done your training at that point and get posted to a unit, or you would then go off and do more. So I got posted at that point to Vaquietse, Quebec, which is north of Quebec City. And it's a predominantly, I would say 90+% French only speaking. That unit that I walked into didn't speak any English. And I did not speak any French. So it was kind of like a yes-no toaster game, and tried to guess a lot of what each other was saying for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to have a few staff members that could speak broken English. Mm-hmm. And so I just had to learn.
That must have been so isolating for you.
It was. And I spent a lot of time by myself. And it took a while. It took a good chunk of time to even feel comfortable to ask what certain words meant in French, so that I could then try to attempt to learn or interject myself in a conversation, or, be part of the unit, really. But that didn't always necessarily work the way I would hoped it would. They would translate something for me, and it would turn out to be not what I said. They would say something else, and yeah, you can see where that went with a group of guys. Mm-hmm. So
how many other women were in there? In that unit?
In my specific troop of people, there was one. Okay. And she was an officer. So when she's the officer, you don't actually work with her. She was in the comms tent, or she was, she wasn't on the guns with me. It was just myself and the guys on the guns. It takes 5 to 7 people to shoot our guns. So like one, because it's such a large machine. It's a 155 millimeter round howitzer. Mm-hmm. So it holds a round that's over 100 pounds per mm-hmm. round. And it shoots about 40 to 45 kilometers in distance. So it takes a lot of moving parts to get that machine moving effectively.
Right.
So she's inside calling the orders and giving us the coordinates to then fire the rounds. So I didn't spend a lot of time with her. And then in the whole regiment itself, there was, I do believe, maybe a handful more split up over a whole regiment of people. So not a lot of women.
And then from there?
Mm-hmm. So from there, we did workup training. That's when you start doing your workup training. So I graduate, go find out that we're going to deploy, and then we go to Edmonton for an extended period of time, where basically you play war games mm-hmm. and you learn how to play war.
Was deployment something you were hoping for?
Yes.
And I feel like as I'm asking you these questions, there's a little voice in my head that goes, I recognize sort of the quality of the questions that I'm asking coming from a place of such ignorance and living my sheltered life.
But it doesn't sound like ignorance. It sounds like you're genuinely wanting to educate the public on other types of jobs that women do that are not necessarily the traditional.
But also myself. I'm sitting here and I'm learning so many new things from this conversation so far. And I'm picturing it all in my head, and it's just, I see now why you've just written a memoir and that it's probably going to be a bestseller as soon as it comes out.
Well, I'm trying. I tried really hard. Here's the thing. That was never the intention to write a book. Like, it wasn't like, I'm going to go do this job. I'm going to come back with some really cool stories and like horrific things. And then I'm going to publish this memoir and do this thing. And that was not.
It's like you've done it. And then, well, okay, well, this is a question for later. But first, can we finish your story?
Absolutely. Yes. I know. You're hanging on.
What happens next?
Oh, gosh. I love how interested you are. So once you do workup training, you go to Edmonton, okay? So Edmonton has a place called Wainwright. It's a very large, wide open space with not a lot there. And that is where you play war games, essentially. So you learn how to move as a cohesive unit, where you, they actually hire actors to come in and play the enemy to attack you. So like, it's really cool. I mean, that sounds bad. I hear how that sounds. Trust me, I hear. It's not cool in that sense, but it's cool that you kind of aren't just like imagining. Like, they give you something tangible to actually get your heart rate up to understand, so that you can hopefully cope with the stress well, because you've experienced a form of it at home in a safe zone where you know that you would have been okay. But, you know, we wear these cool systems that are electronic. And they're like in a super advanced laser tag. And when one of the enemies shoots, it actually goes off and tells you you've been shot X, Y, and Z. This, and then you do the procedures to fix it, and then you have to punch it in. And if you do it incorrectly, the person dies.
Right.
So you learn the value really quickly of making a mistake. Then they take your like friend who you've trained with, and they're like, this person's going to disappear for a while.
Yeah.
And then you don't see them.
Oh my gosh.
So they make it like as real as they can. They try really hard to train you effectively. Whether or not it actually is effective is a different kind of conversation. So you spend, weeks, months in Edmonton. In the winter, like I was there in October. I think it was like October, November. So it was freezing. It was minus like 20, 25. We're in these tents, like these giant military tents that have cots in them, and everybody has their cot. And we go out and we did a operation. We came back, the tent had flipped over. And now there's snow in everything. And that's where you live. So now you're like, oh gosh, I'm gonna set it all up again. It's almost comical at that point, because you've got nothing else you can do but laugh. Or it's just going to be sad.
Yeah.
Like, so much work, so much effort. So you learn really quickly how to just kind of deal with silly things that don't need to be a big deal. Things start to become not as, stressful, or not as like day ending, or, they're just whatever, move on. And then you do training. We did training in Texas. So we also went down to Fort Worth, which is where the U.S. military have a base. And we go down and we do similar training, but with like much more of an Afghanistan looking kind of area. And, that's where you start wearing your tan boots that you'll wear over there. You break them in. And you start to really get your kit ready and really start to get your feet wet. You're shooting live rounds, doing all of that. And then you're down there for about a week. Unfortunately, when I was down there, I got super sick. I got gastro, which is like an intestine, like a bacteria virus that's in your intestine, and it's super painful, and you get really sick. So like the whole base had it down there, and they're like, just make sure everybody washes their hands. And I was like, I'm washing my hands, but why am I getting this? So I got super sick, and I went back home. When we went back a week later, I ended up going back I went back to the hospital for about 3 days on IV until they could like get it out of my system and I could feel better. And then we went back and we had Christmas break. which we get about 2 weeks for. And then I went home to visit some family back east. And then
where's home?
Ontario.
Probably should have started with
No,
that.
it's okay. I live here now, so I live in Vancouver now. So obviously, people think here's home, but really, I'm what my husband likes to call as an import. He moved me from Ontario, so I lived in this super tiny town called Campbellford, near the Trenton Air Base. Yeah, exactly. That's the reaction I get from most people. So what I would. A horrible landmark that is something that people recognize now is Russell Williams.
Yes.
He was my parents' neighbor.
Oh.
So I grew up there, and my cousin Dana also works on the base for D&D, and she knew him and like would run into him all the time. And one of the girls that he tragically took the life of, it was from my town.
Right.
So a lot of people know my area because of that now. So that's, yeah.
You went back home for Christmas.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks. And then after that, where did you go?
After that, I went back to Quebec and we did some more training. And then that's when we finalized everything. Pack up, get your final shots, get everything, send your first set of baggage to Afghanistan. And then you got your last 2 weeks off to go visit your family before you deployed. And so I did that. I drove across the country.
What was your family thinking at this point?
Well, the thing is my parents were super supportive. Okay, so they knew that I would be doing some type of job in this field. They never expected me to be at a computer. Let's be honest. Just my life trajectory and the sports I do and tomboy and all of that. So it was they were very understanding from the get-go. They knew that there was a very high possibility. They told me when I joined the military, like the Canadian Forces told me, we're in an active war. They make a good job of saying, we're in an active war. You will deploy if you go into this specific job, because this is what's tagged red, which means they need people in it desperately.
Right.
So I knew I was going to deploy, but I just happened to be the first one out of my entire graduating classes, all 3 of them, to deploy.
Oh.
Yeah, I was first.
What was that like for you?
Weird. People were super jealous because you spend all this time doing all this training and all this, putting all this effort into, it's like becoming like a professional athlete. You train. Now put me in, coach. Now put me in.
Right. So that sounds like a good thing.
You're excited.
Really excited.
I was stoked.
And then
the
deployment. Tell me about that.
So then I deployed to, so I did my couple weeks, spent time with family, and then I said bye to my parents, and I drove the 7.5 hours it is from my parents' house to the base by myself. And I made that decision. I didn't want them to actually come on the day. I just wanted to say my goodbyes the way I wanted to say my goodbyes. So I went, and that day we got ready. I didn't sleep the night before, as to be expected. And we said bye to all the other families, and we lined up and said off we go, and got on a plane, and off to where we went is where we went. We had to stop. We have a stopover point before you actually fly into Afghanistan. You don't take a commercial flight to Afghanistan. Mind you, they still do. Kabul, you can fly in. It's sketchy, but you can definitely fly.
Right.
But we take a commercial plane to another location, and we spend a few days there. And at that location is where you get rid of all your civilian clothing. You give them to them. And because when you go on a break halfway through your tour, you fly back to that place to get your civilian clothing back. Then you go on your vacation, you come back, kind of thing. So you leave your civilian clothing there, you leave whatever it is that you want to bring. And then that's when you get in your kit. And you get in your full-blown helmet, plates, you get your bulletproof plates given to you, you get your first set of ammunition, your everything, and you get ready to go.
What year are we in now?
And we are in 09.
Oh, summer? Yeah. Or just
we were just before, so I believe it was April. Yeah, the end of April.
And how long were you deployed for?
6 months. So Canada does 6 to 9 month tours. Other countries, they do, depending on the country, they do different time frames. So a lot of times you'll get the special forces guys in the States will do 3, 4, 6, 9, sometimes 13-month tours. And then regular soldiers in the States, like Marines and Army, will do, I think, 11, 12, 15-month tours. But Canada does 6 or 9, which is obviously a lot better for decompression problems and for turnover. You do more tours, but you have the chance to do more tours because they're just shorter and combined.
What was your day-to-day like? Was that a dumb question?
No, it's not a dumb question at all. Why would you know what my day-to-day was like?
have no
Exactly.
idea.
Well, where would you learn that? Nowhere, because so no, it's not a dumb question at all. I think it's a great question. It depended on the day. And it depended on what the Taliban were doing that day in our area and how if we were on operation or if we were in base it depended. So we flew in to that place and then got on the other plane like 3 days later, got everything going, got on the other plane, flew into Afghanistan. When you fly in Afghanistan, you already start coming out hot. So you don't fly in a commercial plane, you fly in a Herc, which is those big planes that can carry tanks and all of that. And you don't fly in and land low like this, you fly in tactically because you're going through 2 mountain sets that the Taliban can take shots from. Anti-aircraft weaponry. So they take shots, right? So you land and you come off. And then the first 3 days we spent in CAF, which is in Kandahar. It's this massive, massive base. That's where the hub of like the military is for all the militaries. Like the US, like NATO, everybody's there. All the countries are represented there. And it's huge. You fly in there and then you go to your side, which was the Canada House section. So we went over to the Canadian side. We met up with our officers. And for the next 3 days, we just basically did briefings on what was going on in the country. What the missions were going to be, like what we would be doing, where we would be going, for how long. Basically that stuff. Just, catching up on, have the IEDs, the types of IEDs changed, have the materials that they use change, have, what's going on in a particular area because of, say if we had recently killed somebody that was like the target, now who's taken over, like just logistics and understanding situational awareness of the country at the time. So you do that for a few days. And then if you, depending on the type of job you do, you either stay in Kandahar, like you stay in the base in CAF, or you go outside the wire. And with my job, you go outside the wire. So we got on a Chinook, which is a 2 propeller plane. So they have those 2 big, they're the long, elongated, they look kind of like a submarine with all the circle windows in them. And they carry people and artillery guns on the bottom. So they pick us up and took us to where we would be for our deployment, which was out in the Maiwan district. So it's like 86 kilometers northwest of Kandahar, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a really tiny base. It's like a 3 kilometer all the way around kind of diameter of a base. It's really tiny. And there was a Marine unit, the 101st were there. And so it was an American base, which the other Canadians had gone to Canadian bases like Massamgard and all of that. So that was different. So we were just a small unit of Canadians with all these Americans. So that was a different.
How many people were in your unit?
We have, the way artillery works is you have 2 guns together all the time.
Right.
There's never just one artillery gun. It's always 2 together.
Right.
And on average, I believe, you've got 7 people on a gun. Then you've got your officers, which is a handful there. And then you've got your staff, which is like your sergeants and you're looking on average, 50, 60 people. Now you stumped me. Now you got me thinking.
At this point, do you think, you had the relationships sort of been formed? Do you feel like the people in your unit?
No, that's the worst part for me. I didn't build that. I didn't have that with them. Being the woman on the guns, being the 5-foot woman on the guns and weighing the same amount as one of the rounds you're shooting downrange, and having a bunch of men who didn't particularly necessarily want me on the guns because they saw it as a weakness.
Yeah.
I never cultivated that sort of relationships with any of them. And that was unfortunate. I tried, and I think at some level they tried, but it just didn't form. And I think it's also the language barrier was a massive part of it for us. They didn't speak English, and some of them were born and raised in Quebec and felt that they didn't need to learn English or didn't want to. So it was interesting. So, it was not exactly the most ideal environment.
But you had to communicate with one another.
I learned French.
Oh, that's neat.
I didn't have a choice. So I learned French. I learned French as much as I could possibly learn French in the short amount of time that I was going to be given to learn French. I put a lot of effort in. I became a mockingbird, and I just would repeat what they would say, and then I would ask them, like, you know, in French, or I'd ask them in French, what is this word in English, but also in French, and I would translate, and I would slowly build my dictionary. It was like a full immersion.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was weird. I learned French. I learned more there and then in school.
How long did you actually stay? Were you deployed for?
I was
in
deployed.
Afghanistan.
I was in Afghanistan from April till July, and then I was on HLTA, which is that break I spoke of, that you go back and you get a couple weeks off. So you and your next of kin, normally, if it's like kind of paid for, you can pick where you want to go. You put a certain amount of money towards it, and then they'll meet whoever you're going to see will meet you where you're going to be. Okay. And so I decided to take my mom to Dominican Republic. But the break on the tour is 3 weeks long. So a long time in Dominican Republic. It was an exceeding amount of time in one resort. Yeah. Too much time in one resort. And unfortunately, right before that's when I sustained my injury. So it wasn't a vacation at all.
So yeah, before you left.
Yeah. So vacation. What had happened? Yeah. So in April, we were on the guns, and then May we were on the guns, and then I got pulled off the guns in June to go on an operation with the British forces. So I got borrowed. What
was your injury?
So how it works is what had happened, I was on that operation, and it was a week long op, and we lost a lot of people, and I went through a lot of things. And I will say what happened is I came out of it with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So however they classified as injury or that's what it is. So when I say like I got injured, I have damage done to my brain. So some situations happened on the operation, and some things happened that damaged me severely when we lost a lot of people. And it was a very intense operation. It was a lot of firefights, a lot of IEDs, a lot of close combat, a lot of danger close fire. It was war.
Right.
Yeah, it was real war.
In your experience, did it seem like it all happened? It happened all at once in a short period of time, and then you just hadn't had the chance to process it? Or
yeah, I think that's a part of it, because after that happens, when people die in action, when people get killed in action, when there's a KIA or somebody's injured, afterward you have to go and meet with the military police and give statements, just like you would if you were a police officer here and you were involved in a shooting with an officer shootings. So I had to spend 4 days. I think it ended up being 4 days, 3 or 4 days, with a British military police officer taking a statement, but they don't use computers, so they handwrite it. They handwrite everything. And so I had to just go over the stories over and over and over and over. And they were the type of stories that were like the things of your nightmares. Right. So not necessarily things you want to constantly keep talking about. Yeah. But you have to, because you need to make sure that everybody, everything that happened was done. Everything that happened the way we all said it happened. It, this is how that person died. We collected X, Y, and Z. They just need to have a proper accounting of it for the families, because the families want to know what happened to their child. Right. And so that doesn't help. And then after I got injured, they sent me back from the British back to the artillery guns before my my break. And that's when everything kind of came to a head. I started seeing things that weren't there. Yeah. I almost fired on a small child, because where you are in Afghanistan, we had a compound, which is like, that's what their homes are called. That's what we call them, compounds. And they're like mud, thick walls. I'll show you some photos after. And there was this compound outside of our fob, and our OP tower, which is where we watch our area, that's our portion of like the Canadian side that we protect, and then the Americans would protect the rest. We would do 4-hour shifts with a fire team partner, and just you're on security. And you would see this little girl walk every morning. You would see her walk every morning, but she would walk her cow, and that would be her thing. But now at this point, when I went and did the OP tower, I hadn't slept in a week. I wasn't processing. I wasn't eating. I wasn't drinking water. I was seeing things. It was horrific. It was like that stereotype, that shell shock, that like full blown, I just wasn't even in my body. My brain was off. Like that light switch that gives you feeling was just gone. And so I was hallucinating, and I thought she was like, when she was waving, I thought she was like pointing a gun at me.
Right.
And instead of just taking the shot, I like stopped myself and went and like had somebody look, because I felt like I was losing my mind.
Right.
And I effectively was.
But you've been dealing with insomnia.
Oh my gosh.
Like you were supposed to sleep, but you just couldn't. Then after a week.
Well, because that week you don't sleep a lot, right? Because you're getting shot at all the time. So you go in, you take a family's compound over, and like you don't hurt them. Like you take it over, and then they stay either at the compound beside them, or they stay like with you, and you have like soldiers on them, and that's like your security. That's your base for the night, right? And like you get attacked at night. You get mortar rounds come in. Like you get. Like this happens, like it's, so you don't sleep a lot. Me being the female searcher, because there's only one of us, like there's only a couple medics, only one bomb dog, and like only one female searcher. So I'm not allowed to do sentry. So I couldn't be on sentry. It's just like OP watching, because there's only so few of you. If one of you gets hurt, they don't have a replacement for you.
Right.
So for me, I would try to sleep, but I wasn't sleeping anyway because rounds are going off. So I went a whole week over, getting a couple hours of sleep at night during the tour or during the actual operation, come back. And then because of everything that happened over there, I just wasn't sleeping anymore because I couldn't sleep, because every time I shut my eyes, I would hear screaming. Right. So I just stopped sleeping. So, that just plays with your mind on top of the traumatic stuff that just had happened. Yeah. It wasn't great.
I really can't imagine.
But I'm glad you can't imagine.
Feeling in my chest right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you were back
with my mom at that time. We went on the break. Went with my mom.
You sort of just wrote out that period. So after you realized you were hallucinating.
Yeah, that's when they really were like, okay, we've got a problem.
Okay, and then they just sent you away on your break?
Yeah, they sent me to the hospital in Kandahar, and the doctors there diagnosed me right away and put me on a heavy dose of all these different drugs, which just kind of compounded and made it worse, because the drugs that they put me on were like not for my weight. They were not for my size, my body size, and they probably shouldn't all been taken together. So I was just like a walking zombie in Kandahar. And then they sent me on my break. So I flew through Dubai and Heathrow, Toronto to Dominican, all while being just in like, not really even sure how I got there. Do you know what I mean? That fog, that sort of. So I had that. And then I spent 3 weeks there, and my mom was just devastated when I got there.
Yeah.
She didn't even know who I was. No idea. I didn't sleep. I would just scream at night. I just was angry at everything. I was just I would just burst into tears while we were sitting by the pool in like one of the most beautiful places ever. Like it just wasn't right, and she knew it wasn't right.
Right.
And then it was time to go back. So I went back and flew all the way back through and all of that. And
what was the expectation when you got back? Was just to go back to what you
the expectation that they had for me was that I'd go back to the guns, and I would have been fine. The decompression time would have done what it needed to do and was designed to do. You have decompression. And then I'd go back to doing the rest of the tour. But in reality, what it had done, done more damage than it was way worse than it needed to be. Like I was at that point so far down that hole of the traumatic events that had happened that I couldn't pull myself out, and the PTSD had fully set in. Like it really had taken hold, and the damage was done by that point. And so they brought me out to the guns, and realized really quickly that I wasn't capable any longer of doing my job. One, because the medication was so strong I couldn't function. And number two is without the medication, I was ineffective. I wouldn't want to be the person in like a fire team partner with. Like if things started happening, I couldn't handle myself, and I would never want somebody to have that burden. So when they said, you know, we're sending you home to the hospital, I was like, I can't, like, I tried to fight it. I fought it tooth and nail. I was angry. I was so angry because I wasn't ready to go. And when you go through some of the things that a lot of soldiers who are on the front lines or have seen action, any combat, they'll tell you is when you lose somebody in that type of environment, in that type of experience, in that traumatic way, you lose a part of you there, and you feel now like you need almost revenge. Like you need to get back at getting them for doing what they just did to your person, to your friend. So I didn't feel that my job was done. I didn't feel like my job was done. I didn't feel like I had finished what I went there to do. And that crushed me. I felt like a failure. And then I had some staff members call me a failure and say it would have been much easier if I just died. It would have been less paperwork. So it was a really rough time.
Were those people on the front lines with you? Or?
No, these were like high up majors in the military. Terrible
just
people.
Like layers and layers of trauma.
And so that's what I mean. Like if it was handled better, maybe it wouldn't have been as damaging and I could have pulled out of it earlier and stayed in the forces. But it essentially, that was the career ending operation for me. That was it. That was the end of my life in the military as I knew it. I just wasn't aware at the time.
It sounds like as you were telling this story to me, in my mind, I pictured sort of the mentality that you had going in and that you were able to sustain until the series of events, the trauma that occurred, and then being sent away and coming back. And it sounded to me like there was a shift in that mentality, like you were bulletproof, and then you had a bunch of things happen to you. But I also, now I'm hearing, and this is the interesting part, is that even though you were traumatized, even though you couldn't make sense of all like the emotional, what's it called when you have like emotional memories?
Yes. Yeah, it's just that the triggers that bring on that like full-blown flashback.
That there's still a part of you that really wanted to complete your mission.
It was really hard on me, and I still struggle with it. I do, and it's been oh my God, it was 10 years in June, which was crazy to think. Oh my, I don't know where that went. I don't even know I don't recognize that person.
Right.
It's weird.
So your military career ended. You were sent back.
Well, I was sent back not until September. So I was sent back, and I got back at the very beginning of September. And I was sent back to Quebec by myself. So I flew with all of that going on. When I got back to Quebec, it was like 3 a.m. I was like totally by myself. I had to find my way back from the base. And I went back, and like all of the housing that we all lived in, well, most of us lived in, was being like redone. So I had nothing there. So I went back to the regiment, and they just told me right off the bat, like that I was leaving. And then I had to report to the hospital in Ottawa, and that was it. So I did that, and I packed everything up and didn't get a chance to say goodbye to anybody or really have any closure with anyone, and left. My whole life that I just spent all that time building, left, and went to Ottawa and reported to the hospital. And after I did that, when I was released, the military is like, we'll contact you when we have a new posting for you in Ottawa, like the new job, because we're going to try to retrain you to see if we can get you back in. Then nobody called me for 6 months. I had no contact with the military for 6 months.
Okay.
Which was the most odd, that never happens.
Right. What were you hoping to potentially be retrained for?
My job, just to do my job again. So that, because there was another tour the following year that I was going to be going on, and I wanted to go on that. But if I couldn't get it back together, in their opinion, in their eyes, or what they considered to be back together.
What, did you even know what that would look like?
No, I didn't even know what it would look like just living my life from that point on, leaving the base. I had no idea what it was supposed to look like, because I was just with a unit that deployed and got back, and I knew there'd be some change up, but not like that. Not like that at all.
So 6 months.
And
what
then,
were you doing in the waiting for that call?
That's exactly it. I was doing nothing. I was going crazy. I was staring at walls and taking these drugs that they gave me that would comatose me for 3 days at a time. I was spending all the money that I made on the tour because I was trying to feel anything. I was destructive behavior. I was angry. I was just, it wasn't good at all.
Right.
And then they called.
Did anyone explain to you what PTSD would look like? Did you have a sense of what your condition entailed and how it would impact you, et cetera, or do you feel like you were just left to deal with it?
I think initially when I was diagnosed in Afghanistan, I think initially what they had told me would happen would be, they told me that I'd be taking some medication, doing some treatment, and hopefully just riding it out and then feeling better. Like that I would be doing different types of therapy and all of that. And hopefully it would have turned into more of an acute PTSD, which I could work through and then kind of get back on the job. And so that's initially what I was anticipating, until you realize really quickly that like there was no sleep happening. Nothing was getting better. Things were getting worse. Suicide was starting becoming an option for me. Like it just was not good at all. And at this time I was really fortunate because I was dating my now husband. And without him, I wouldn't be here, because he would answer the phone like right before I decided to, like he answered the phone one day right before I decided to kill myself. If he wasn't going to answer, that was it. He answered the phone. He always answers the phone. He doesn't matter. He always was there. And so he was the failsafe in that. He came in and stepped in and helped me in ways that the government should have done. Our Canadian forces should have done, like looked after their people, So I'm grateful for that, but it was rough.
So you were in therapy?
Yeah, I'm still in therapy. I've been in therapy every week. The idea that I would go back to it was always the intention. Always the intention. So.
And then you got the call that you couldn't.
Yeah, well, what had happened is I had spent, at that point, they called me and said, we're going to try to retrain you at a range. And so they sent me to the range, and I was doing 2 half days a week there at the range, trying to just reintegrate. And then they asked me to go clear a grenade range. And when I did that, I had a really bad breakdown, like panic attack and flashback. And they realized right then and there that I was not going to be retrainable. The therapy wasn't working. The medications weren't working. It wasn't smart at that point to keep subjecting me to that, I think, is what in their mind was. So they decided to give me a 3B medical release. So I was medically discharged from the military. I was medically honorably discharged from the military. So I was discharged May 23rd, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by then you were 22?
I was 22, yeah, by that point.
I'm hearing all of this. It's a really big thing. Like people, I think the thing that, so I also have had experience, I've had a diagnosis of clinical depression. I've had a diagnosis of complex PTSD from my childhood. And a lot of what I understand about PTSD and depression now has been the result of self-study and really trying to test theories, because there is no consensus on how really to treat depression. I've been on like a cocktail of drugs, and most recently coming off them felt like coming off opioids. I don't know what that's like, but reading on forums, lots of people describing what it was like. I related to that. For you, it sounds like just the experience of taking something that you believed to be your purpose and something that you committed your whole life to, and then having that be stripped from you, and then add on top of that all of the trauma and the things that you witnessed and not having the proper protocol for that to be dealt with. And then being sent back, and now, okay, go live your life now.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. That's exactly what happens. It's how it works. They, depending on, I'm actually, which is, this is the weird part, is I'm actually one of the lucky ones, because I was diagnosed while I was there. And when that happens, there's a paper trail. And because of that paper trail, I was able to get a support team out in British Columbia, where I live now. Mm-hmm. And the doctors that I have working with me now are the reason that I'm able to function somewhat and be in society somewhat and do, periodic things that I feel like I can do during the day. With that, I've been lucky because they hear me and see me every week. They check in on me. They know, even if I'm telling them I'm fine, if I'm having a bad day, they know what's really going on. And so I'm one of the lucky ones. And to think that I still have to, I was recently cut off by Manulife SISIP 4 days before Christmas. My benefits were cut off, and I would be told that I wouldn't be receiving what I was owed any longer, because on social media, my life looked like I was doing really, really well. So in their eyes, instead of them taking my doctor, who had been spending the past 8 years keeping me alive, taking his word and his forms and his treatments, they basically said Google basically was like what they were going off. So I reported it to the news, because if I'm one of the lucky ones and I'm getting this kind of pushback from the insurance company, who is supposed to be working with the government to help veterans when they get out and reintegrate, and they're telling me that they're basing their research off of essentially social media. Mm-hmm. That's heartbreaking to me, because then what is it like for the person who got turned down by the government? What is it like for the person who has no family support, has no treatment, has no doctors? What is it like for those people? So that's why I've been that voice. I'm trying to be that voice. Because if these people are getting, the type of crap that they're getting, and the no support that they're getting, they're not providing them with anything. Like a lot of people just get flat out told no. Mm-hmm. They reapply. I have a girlfriend who has reapplied multiple times, and I know for a fact that she has PTSD. She's been diagnosed, but because their paper trail didn't suit the way they wanted it, the government turned her down for support. Veteran Affairs turned her down like 3 different times.
Right.
But that's like the normal. That's the normal. So if I'm the lucky one who's got the support, and I still struggle the way I struggle with getting, the funding I believe I'm owed, or the the treatment or whatever, if I'm getting all of that with the team I have, what are these people not getting?
Exactly. That breaks my heart to hear. Also, how many people can sort of just get a segment on the doctors on primetime TV to talk about that story?
I've been very, very fortunate with some of the people that have fallen into my lap by coincidence, or by whatever you want to call it, luck or the universe or whatever. But I've been really fortunate with the people I've had around me. A lot of these people have just kind of stepped up and taken me under their wing and really helped to, drive the cause of mental health and what I'm trying to do now as, an advocate, but, as a business owner and an author and all of these things. I'm trying to use that little bit of extra support I was given, and I'm trying to maximize it and spread it as far and wide as I can, so that these other people don't have to keep suffering in the way that they are, right, and making suicide the only option.
So we've gotten this far into your story. Mm-hmm. Tell me about Brass and Unity.
Yeah.
How
weird,
did
huh?
it get started?
Weird, huh?
That's how we met too.
We met at it was the TEDx. Yeah, the TEDx, yeah.
And you had a line of jewelry then, and it wasn't called Brass and Unity.
No, it was called Her Wearables. It was like where I was still just starting.
So this must have been in 2015. So a year before that, you started making jewelry on your kitchen table.
Yeah, kitchen table.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I totally did. Yeah, well, because at the time, so my doctor suggested maybe trying art therapy. I thought that was very silly, because he knew me better than that to know that I'm not going to sit there and paint all day. Like, it won't work for me. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of put a spin on that. And I was like, well, I'm going to try like a different version of art therapy. And I had slowly been hearing about crystals, like amethysts and howlites and rose quartz and all that. And I started hearing that, they work for stress and things like that. And I've never really been the person to believe any of that. But then I was at that point in my healing with PTSD that I was so exhausted and so tired of just nothing working. I was so done with nothing working. And I was willing to try anything at that point to make myself feel any better or feel anything, because I was numb, completely numb. So I went to a bead store and like bought up a bunch of beads and went to Michael's and bought some elastic and some wire and some pliers and started kind of playing. And then I got a bunch of old casings from some friends, and my husband got me a pipe cutter and a drill and a hammer, and I just started hammering on brass casings, and I started building bracelets and jewelry. And when I look back at them now, I'm like, how did anybody pay for that? Like, it crushes me.
Brass casings. Did you get that from Michael's too?
No, those I had some friends in the military that I got some from.
Right.
Now that would be, Michael's wouldn't carry that sort of.
Yeah.
You're like, when did Michael start carrying ammunition? No, so I got some from them, and I started building some jewelry, and I brought it to a couple stores. Some friends started buying them, and I brought it to a couple stores, and they kind of said, do you have line sheets? And I said, I don't know what a line sheet is. They're like, do you have pricing? I'm like, no. So I just kind of learned the rough way. And I was fortunate because my husband owns 2 companies of his own that are very successful. He's an entrepreneur on his own. And my father-in-law had a very successful company. So I really had a lot of knowledge to pull from. And they really took me under their wing. And I said one day at Cactus Club in White Rock, I said, hey guys, I'm going to start a jewelry company. And they're like, okay, cool. What do you need? And that was it. And it started there.
Is that an idea that you came up with?
I had a dream. Yeah, I had a weird dream that I was going to start a jewelry company, and I was going to call it Her. And that's where that came from. I have no idea why, but I did. And then a year later, we changed the name and completely revamped and redesigned, rebranded everything, changed everything, and started manufacturing. And started, we moved from the kitchen table to a small room in the house. Then we moved from the small room to the entire basement. And then 2 years ago, we moved into our first office and warehouse building. And we did our first build out. And that's where we are now.
It sounds to me, because I remember when I met you 5 years ago with Her Wearables, you had decided then that you were going to donate a portion of each sale to veterans and veterans assistance.
That was the whole cause, is I wanted to know that not only could I do something, but I could do something that I knew could have purpose. And the purpose was helping these people, because I was sick and tired of getting calls, because I was getting calls that my friends are killing themselves left, right, and center. And that the narrative is that 22 a day. We're losing 22 people a day. That's like the number, but it's so much higher than that, because we don't know the real numbers, because it's not often they don't know that it's because of maybe PTSD or a service-related injury. So the numbers are kind of a bit of askew there. But in terms of, I'm tired of the suicide being the option. And I was tired of seeing our veterans go homeless and, addiction on the rise with the homeless veterans, because they've got nobody to turn to for help, and they have no way of getting help because they have nobody to teach them how. And it just kind of sparked from there. And I wanted to do something, whether it was a foundation or a charity or a nonprofit. I just knew I wanted to do something.
Was this part of your dream when you dreamt of starting your own jewelry company? Yeah. You always knew you were going to find a way to help veterans.
I just needed to help these people, because I felt now at this point, I was pulled away. In my mind, I had some things happen on the tour that there had to be a reason I lived through. There had to be. There's no way I should have, but I did. No logical reason. So I had to use whatever that reason was. I had to use that wisely. Use that time I'm being given wisely, to do whatever it needed to be to help our community and help our vets and help our first responders too, because it's not just our vets, right? It's our vets are, obviously I'm one of them, but our first responders, like, I see what they go through on a daily basis, and I see what they go through just by knowing friends that are first responders, and it's really rough to watch. So I needed to find a way, and this just happened to be that way. So we donate now. Brass and Unity donates 20% of all net profits to different veteran and first responder organizations all over the world. Through every piece we sell, something gets donated, and the rest of it goes to funding the company. I don't take a paycheck. I don't take any money from this company. The goal is to donate $1 million before I ever take anything out of it.
I didn't know that. That wasn't part of my research anywhere.
No.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. I don't take a single pay.
And your insurance has been cut off.
Yeah. So it's weird. So I told them that I was going to call the news, and I did. And an article came out quite quickly. And what I found was really crazy about that was I started getting hundreds of emails from vets all over Canada going, this is happening to me. This happened to me. They did that to me. They did this to me. And they cut me off, and there was nothing I could do about it. And, that was it. And I started to realize really quickly how many people were being severely affected by this.
Right.
Not just like Veterans Affairs, but
class action lawsuit.
Well, Manulife is an insurance company. They're not even the government. Manulife is the insurance company that the government they use a program called SISIP.
Right.
Yeah. It's a vocational rehab program.
Okay.
That can provide long-term disability, or they can pay for schooling for retraining. So, yeah, I mean, I want people to know what's going on so that if they can step out and reach out and go, oh my God, it's happening to me too. Like, if we could get all of us to realize that this is all happening to us, and we don't deserve it. Nobody deserves this. We don't deserve to be followed by private investigators taking pictures of us, trying to prove that our injuries, what we provide on paper is what we, say every year. Because every year we have to provide documentation to them, stating why we're still injured.
Right.
I have friends who've lost legs that still
me
have to do that.
The type of person who would want to enroll or enlist in the military and go overseas and fight for the country doesn't sound like the type of person who would be motivated to commit fraud
or scam the system.
Like, that makes no sense to me.
None of us enjoy having to leave our jobs that we worked so hard for, trained so hard for. When people don't understand, I had one of the people from Manulife say that to me. Well, we're going to send you to a new doctor, one of our doctors, to get a proper assessment because we don't believe you're doctors. And I said, do you know how sad? They said, just be professional. I said, you want me to be professional about some of the most traumatic things that have ever happened in my lifetime? I said, that right there just shows how insensitive you are, and your training needs to change, because their clients that they're dealing with are people like me and way, way worse. Mind you, I'm a lot better than I used to be. I still have my days, don't you get me wrong. Every day is a new day. Every day is a struggle. Every day is different. Some days are great. Some days you don't get out of bed, but that's the nature of the beast of having that disorder. So it's sad when you hear that response from them, that you just hope that those people are better educated in dealing with situations like that.
Right.
I think that would help the community so much more. So that's our goal, is just to, not just be a jewelry company, not just be an accessory, but be a movement, a piece for hope, a product for change. That's what I want. That's all I want. So
I'm just trying to look for a way to bring this up, but there's no. So obviously, anybody who wanted to look you up online would see.
I look like I'm killing it.
And your jewelry is being worn by some of the biggest celebs.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
You have a whole roster. And so my question to you is, at what point did you start to realize, like, oh, this thing is becoming, it's getting to a point where it seems to be growing much bigger than what I thought it would be?
It happened fairly early on. And the reason being is I met some people by fluke fairly quickly that kind of changed the trajectory of who would be wearing it. And it was weird. So I was in Las Vegas. I was pregnant at the time, and I went to a trade show called Magic. And Magic is like the fashion buying show for part of the season. And it's at the Mandalay Bay. It's huge. So that's just like a dramatic breakdown waiting to happen, because it's such a big area with a lot of people, really tight. And So, I went based on, I'm going to try to get out of my comfort zone here. So I went, and I was having dinner one night with a friend. And these two gentlemen sat down beside me at a restaurant that was completely maxed out. They're like, we don't have room, but we'll squeeze you two in. And then this other table opened up and they kind of squeezed those two people in. And we all weren't supposed to be there. Like, we weren't supposed to be able to get in. It was very serendipitous. And it turned out to be these lovely gentlemen named Justin, Makita, and Todd Hawkins. And they have an amazing organization in the United States called Tie the Knot. And it's for LGBTQ rights and that movement. And Justin is Jesse Tyler Ferguson from Modern Family. That's his husband.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And his business partner is Todd Hawkins, who in his own right is amazing. He's a total powerhouse, especially in the gay rights movement community, in just the laws, in any sort of awareness. Like, they are incredible. They work within that celebrity community to, help better the world by using their platforms. So they kind of said to me at dinner, like, we got chatting. They're like, I love your bracelet. And I was like, thank you. And so then we were talking. Next day we had a meeting. And they're like, we think we can help you. And we're like, that would be incredible. I had no idea what that would entail, or the road it would take me down. 6 months later, we were in talks with Beth Bears from Two Broke Girls in the Neighborhood to do a collection with her for her sexual assault foundation, an equine therapy program called She Heard Power. And so I got the privilege to work with Beth on a couple pieces. And right after that, Beth started talking about it in the public. And she went on Ellen and she talked about her brand. And she wore a bracelet. And she was, I'm doing this collection with Brass and Unity, and you can find them here. And
is this segment online? Can I find it?
Yeah, I'll send. Yeah, let me look. Let me see. Let me find out where it was, because that one was in 2017, I believe. So we went on, and I had no idea that she was doing that. So our website went crazy, and it was insane. And then, the collection was doing great, and I got to go launch it down with Beth at one of her launch events with, Kat Dennings and all these amazing people that she's friends with that happen to be in the celebrity community. And that was a really crazy world to kind of dip my toe in and see what that was like. And we helped donate, tons of funds to her equine therapy program. And it was amazing for sexual assault survivors of trauma. And then another couple months later, we get a call from Todd, and he's like, Ellen wants to put you on her 12 days of giveaway. Can you send 450 bracelets, by Saturday for the audience? And we're like, okay. So we did. So we sent that, and then we were on her 12 days of giveaway.
Right. Was it stressful on your manufacturer to?
At that time, I was the manufacturer.
Oh, that's great.
These two hands were the entire manufacturer. We had packaging being made overseas because my husband's companies, he has manufacturing done overseas. So we have a family relationship essentially with these factories already, which I kind of walked right into, which was pretty incredible. And then, so we get the packaging sent, but everything else, like the raw beads come, and I was assembling and building everything there. So that was crazy. Yeah, that was stressful, because now my computer was ding, 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 and I'm printing off all these going, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. So it was just a lot of sleepless nights to catch up, and we got everything out. We got everything dialed, and it was an incredible experience. But then the thing that we didn't find out about till weeks later was, after they did the giveaway part, Beth and Ellen were talking about the stuff right beside them, and then Ellen put a bracelet on and started wearing it.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, but we didn't know about that until later. And I saw the segment and I went, I'm sorry, what? So that was an incredible moment.
So where are things with Brass and Unity today? I would imagine you don't get together with your board and you brainstorm KPIs like, well, let's, get our products on all these celebrities. I'm sure that's a nice thing and it's cool, but
yeah, that's not the plan.
Entire mission that is
that's not the
completely
plan.
separate from that.
So on the flip side, because of some of the celebrities, we've been able to gain traction online. Obviously, more traction would be better. The more we can sell, the more we can help. So it's funny because after that it snowballed. So we're good friends with Jenna and Channing when they were married. Their nanny is good friends of ours. So Channing was learning how to ride motocross, and my husband, he used to be a professional supercross and motocross racer. Excuse me. And it was pretty great because she had contacted him for a neck brace because my husband owns a neck brace company. And we said, hey, do you think that Jenna would be interested in maybe wearing any of Kelsi's stuff? And she's like, send some stuff along, I'll ask her. So I gave Jenna this package, and then I just get this picture. And it's Jenna and Channing and them at a Lakers game. And Jenna's wearing our stuff, and you can see it all over her. And it's this like incredible, like, oh my gosh, like now I'm on Jenna, like Dewan, like that's ginormous. And then I get a call, and Beth's really good friends with Julianne Huff. And so Julianne saw it, loved it, wore it, did a whole blog post on it, did a whole like segment on our stuff and like how we were helping with Beth's foundation.
Right.
And then Beth's friends with Whitney Cummings, the comedian.
Yeah.
So then they started wearing it. And then she goes on Ellen again. And then she's on Ellen's Snapchat wearing like it's. And then my mom and dad are long haul truck drivers. And my mom was driving for Kevin Hart's What Now tour when he was on tour with it. And they stopped in Vancouver. And my mom's like, you need to meet my daughter. And so she would just harass him the whole tour and be like, you need to meet my daughter. And then Kevin pulled me backstage after the show with my husband and my mom. And we chatted for like 15 minutes. And we talked about the brand and like what he thought it could do. And then he tweeted it to 26 million people. So it was this crazy snowball effect. But people have this perception that when you have celebrities, you blow up, but it doesn't, that's not how it works. Just because you have a celebrity wearing your stuff doesn't mean it goes, it just means that you've got it on some people. Now the hard work begins.
Right.
And now the hard work is getting people to understand what that is.
Right.
And why they should care about your brand over, say, Alex and Annie, or why they should care about your brand over any other jewelry brand. Everybody thinks that once you have celebrities wearing your brand, then it does its own thing, but it does that for like a split second. Like you said, it's a dime a dozen.
Right.
And
You're
so,
getting all these hits. Now, I would imagine your challenge back when you were getting the surge of hits, and you probably are, it comes in waves.
yeah, it ebbs and flows, right?
That your challenge is, how do I turn those hits into people actually understanding what we're all about?
And that's the challenge for us as a brand, is getting people to understand that we're not just another, jewelry brand out there, that our brand is not only revered for being, strong, like really great quality, but it also does the most important thing of all. It changes and helps people. It changes and helps people's lives, and it fixes things that are wrong in our system, and it bridges that gap for charities. We donate so much money to different charities, and that helps fund these projects that they do that help our homeless veterans and first responders. Honor House in New Westminster, TWS in Toronto. There's plenty of different charities that I work with. I could go on and on and on, that we donate to, and they are the ones that are bridging that gap, so that those that are falling through the cracks that the government is dropping, they're kind of catching them.
Right.
Yeah. So our jewelry is so much more than jewelry. It's just a vehicle. It's just a vehicle to get the money where it needs to be.
It sounds like really what's driving the brand is the cause and the mission, and before people really even understand your story, they have a sense of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I just want to better what I consider to be my community. And I think there's a worldwide epidemic going on, and it's evident in a lot of communities. Great Britain, if you look to any military that has been part of the past, 15 to 18 years of war, you will find a military that has a community of soldiers that are, I don't want to say broken, because they're not broken, but they're damaged, and they're not being helped in the way that they deserve to be or that they should be. Because kind of the idea is when you get out, you're supposed to be helped, but really you're more of like you're disposable. You're just another number that can be replaced with another 18-year-old coming through the system, right? So it would be much more cost effective, in my opinion, to just look after your people. And if you look after your people properly the first time, then you don't have to get new people constantly. And so if we brought our people home and gave them truly what they need to function in every sense of the word and supported them wholeheartedly, I don't think you would see the low numbers in the military. I don't think you would see the rapid turnover rate. I think you would see people who actually are proud of them to support the military and help their military. It's not about supporting war, because you can support your military without supporting war. We're the last resort, right? We're the fail-safe, and we're only used when we're, really, really needed. Unfortunately, the wars we're currently in, what we've been brought into because we're a part of NATO, which is, it's our allies. You go with your allies. Unfortunately, the war has been going on way too long, and we now have this abundance of we have a whole generation. We have an abundance of people that are now back from these wars and who are damaged and are just being left to the side, and we need to fix that problem. And in my mind, my way of fixing that problem, instead of just asking for money to donate, is let's provide somebody with not only a piece, but a source of hope to wear every day, or give to somebody, or maybe just that small reminder that there are other things going on outside of their small bubble. And so that's what I hope we can provide.
Sounds like there's just so much potential left to be saved.
Absolutely.
I've been told that often pro athletes make some of the best entrepreneurs because of that mindset that they have going in. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities between pro athletes and people in the military, just based on this conversation alone. And people don't question the potential of pro athletes.
No, they don't.
After their career. Like on this show, I talked to somebody who sustained a career-ending injury. She was a former Team Canada sprint cyclist. And so she was able to take everything that she's learned, and sort of channel it into a new career path, and she's doing quite well in it. She also doesn't have to deal with all of the stigma that veterans deal with, because she wasn't one.
Yeah.
But I'm not at all like trying to
No. You're not comparing. Here's the thing, there's no comparison.
Right.
But there is a comparison in the same way that there's a comparison in a truck driver driving and a bus driver driving. You're both driving large vehicles in tiny spaces. They're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. She was a pro athlete. What we work at in our job is to be the best at what we do. And that means shooting well and aiming and being a great solid soldier. So that was our number one priority in life. And hers was to be a sprint cyclist. So it's comparison, but it's not. And there's no offense. So don't worry.
I'm noticing similarities. And then I think how heartbreaking it is for all of that potential that someone can have, and to have it go down the drain because they decide to take their own life. Because
it happens every day.
And resources, and that truly breaks my heart. And to picture the work that you're doing and how fundamentally you are trying to save all of that potential, maybe that's not the right way.
But I think it is that right way, because I think that there's potential in every single one of those soldiers when they come home. I think the potential is being overlooked due to an injury, and I think the potential is being overlooked due to the amount of work they see attached to that person. The risk reward isn't there for them. So, that how much time versus, when's the cutoff point? When are we losing more money than we are going to benefit from this person getting better?
And it's just terrible that there are other people that are completely detached from the situation, being able to make calls. Like they're able
that's how Veterans Affairs. So Veterans Affairs, that's their case managers. Like a case manager reads your file and they know you from the paper. I've been fortunate with my case manager, Helen Bennett's been incredible. She comes in, she knows exactly who I am. She could pick me out on the street. But because there's so many offices, and resources being cut constantly, the case managers' loads are getting so extensive that they don't have time to go have these personal relationships. And then they're being asked to make these calls. And they don't really truly know how that person necessarily would be doing, depending on their caseload. So you've got somebody in Halifax, in the Manulife building in Halifax, calling us saying you're being cut off because we look like you're doing great. When in reality, you're on the other side of the country, literally the other side of the country, and you have a PI follow me, so you think that's you knowing me. But you don't know what I go through on a daily like struggle. You don't get how much it, medication or this or that it takes me to function, to even be able to do the day-to-day things. You just see the day-to-day things happening. It's like when you're an entrepreneur, nobody sees that grind. Nobody sees that, up all night crying, like hoping you're going to be able to make the next payday for your people, hoping that, nobody sees that grind. They see you when you're up here, when you've made it, when you're doing, successful things. They just don't see it, but yet they're able to judge it and make decisions about your life for you. So I think that can change. I think that can change as long as the discussion continues to change and people continue to be willing to talk about what's truly going on in our system. And I think if our jewelry company, even though it's, it's not a gun company, it's not a coffee company, it's not an ammunition company. I know it's not in the realm of necessarily the military's shtick, but like if our jewelry company, however big or small it gets to be in life, can be a source of funding to fix this problem, then I will have done my job. And that isn't, I will have done my job and been able to pay myself and be successful because I've been able to pay myself. I will have done my job as, in my opinion, a soldier. I will have come home and listen, I went to Afghanistan to help. Did we actually help? I'll never know because I will never be going back there. In my mind, I think I did. In reality, you can only help if you're wanted there, right? Anyway, so what I'm getting at is I went over there to do my job. I thought I did as much of my job as I was given the opportunity to do. I've come here and now I've taken that drive and that passion to help one another, to help somebody, and driven it into our own community. And I just think it's about time our country and the countries who have active duty soldiers realize that. And I find it very sad that I had to come up with a jewelry company to raise awareness for what our children, for lack of a better word, 18-year-old children are doing, stepping up and going to war to protect our own country when people in our own country aren't willing to protect them when they come home. Like, it's sad, but I'm willing to do it.
The symbolism of that piece of jewelry, if nothing else, at the very least, can serve a reminder of an otherwise forgotten population.
Absolutely.
I just, I love what you're doing. I was going to save this part till the very end, but we're almost there. I want to, before we get there though, I want to talk about the memoir that you've just written. How did you get a book deal?
Weird,
How did you get Jim Treliving of Dragon's Den, the CEO of Boston Pizza, to write your foreword? And I saw on Instagram, you just had dinner with him last week.
Yeah, I did at the Blue Water Cafe. Yeah, it was really cool. Jim came up, Jim and another friend of ours, Michael Ravenhill, who is the CEO of the David Foster Foundation, which is an incredible foundation in its own right. They are really good friends. And Michael is one of those kind of mentor people I told you about who have kind of taken me under their wing and really seen, besides my husband and my family, have been really the people who have seen that I have something more to give this world and that I have something more than just being a burden on society as a damaged soldier, a broken soldier. I can be more than that. In whatever way that is, I can be more than that. And so about a year ago, I met somebody when I was at a meeting in Toronto at the Together We Stand Foundation. And it was a gentleman, and he kind of just said to me, we became good friends, and he kind of said, I think you should write a book. Like, I could get your book sold. Like, I really think so, because your book is incredible. Your story is incredible. I think your book could be. And I said, well, funny enough, I wrote a book about 5 years ago, but my computer crashed and I lost it. So I had previously done that. And I said, I'll never ever put myself through that again unless I have a book deal, like and he's like, well, that won't happen. People will want to see pages. And I said, okay. I said, I'll agree to do a book, but you go and try and sell it first. Within a couple weeks, I had spoken with a publisher and sold the rights to my book. So they hadn't seen any pages. They kind of just said, this is the due date for your manuscript. Have you written before? I was like, nope. And off I went. and pumped out 80,000 words in 2 months. And you're a blogger and you're a writer, so you know how difficult that can be.
I write one blog post a year.
Yeah. Well, I wrote one book in my life. That's how much I've written. That's it.
In 2 months.
In 2 months, I pumped that thing out.
This is the mentality I was talking about before that pro athletes have, that I'm learning now that
I used to be a competitive athlete, so this isn't far off. I used to fight competitively internationally in Taekwondo my whole life. I fought in the military equivalent level of the military Olympic team kind of level. Like, that's what I fought at. So I get it. I get what it takes to be an athlete. I totally get the comparison in that. Yeah, so it's that drive, I think, that want to always do whatever you're going to do, but do it at the very best of, your ability. And so that's what that was. And it's just finished now. I had a huge support team that worked with me on it. And I was very fortunate, a team in Toronto and some really great people, Heidi and Jamie, who just, Alistair, all these people who took it and were just kind of like, we're going to take your manuscript, we're going to edit it, we're going to give you pointers, and let's kind of do this. And we did that. And I can say I wrote it, which is an incredible feeling to say. And it's done. And now we just wait until the release date. And yeah.
How did you meet Jim Treliving?
So Jim, okay, so this is, like I mentioned, this is how I kind of seem to roll. On that ride last year, I did a fundraising ride for Wounded Warriors Canada, where 150 of us got on our road bicycles and rode 600 kilometers through France for the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landing in Juno Beach. So we rode our bikes for charity, and we raised, I think it was just under $750,000. And we went over and we rode. And on this ride was a couple people, a friend of ours had brought some of his friends. And that was Trevor Guthrie. He used to be the lead singer of Soul Decision, a boy band in the 90s. You wouldn't even know because we're too young. Anyway, he's great. You know that "This Is What It Feels Like" song that's on the radio? That's him.
Okay.
So I tease him because he used to be in a boy band.
Ah!
Yeah, it was the best because everybody was in a boy band in the 90s.
Right.
Right. You weren't even born yet.
No, I was, but...
Barely. That's okay. So anyway, he's a big... Trevor's a huge supporter of Wounded Warriors and like veterans in general and their causes. So he brought some friends on the ride, and we had met Trevor on a previous Wounded Warrior ride. So we got to know him. He brought some friends, and Michael and Jonathan, Michael Ravenhill was one of his friends, and Michael and I and my husband kind of got to know each other over the week. And he kind of said to me at the end of the ride, I think you might have something, there with what you're doing, and contact me if, you ever see that I could help. And I just took, on the off chance, I called him out of the blue when I was finished writing the book. And he was like, cool, let's see if we can work together on this. And then he's like, I have somebody I want you to meet. And him and his wife, his amazing wife, they work with this amazing foundation, and they're big donors of it. And they do a lot of work on awareness for it. And it's Jim and Sandy. You might know Jim, and he was explaining. I was like, I know exactly who you're talking about. Like, don't worry about it. You don't have to explain. So he's like, well, I'm coming up, and I want to see if maybe we can all have dinner together. And then sure enough, that morning I got a call last week, and it was like, yeah, we're going to have dinner here and just meet us there. And we did. And it was one of the most incredible dinners ever.
So this is the dinner meeting last week.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, okay, at this point.
So when I met Michael, it was in June. I got all this book stuff happened in August. And so up until this point, Michael's been helping me through this process with my team of people. And,
did you even know you were going to need a foreword? Was that something?
No, I didn't know what a foreword was. I don't know. I'm new. I kind of have a bad habit of diving headfirst into all these things and then just kind of figuring it out.
That's what entrepreneurs do.
Oh man, do we ever? And we do it the hardest way possible, it feels like. But yeah, so what had happened is Michael kind of was talking this through over the past couple months with me, and then was like, yeah, I think there's a chance for us to talk with Jim and Sandy, and because they're aligned, and Jim they do this, they work with this amazing foundation. They're on the board of this foundation, and it's called KMH in Toronto, and it's one of the, leading research at hospitals on mental health and addiction. And it's incredible. They just fundraised, I think, $500 million last year for this hospital and this facility and this education facility in Toronto for mental health. And it is just incredible because they don't have to be doing that at all. They don't have to be spending their time doing that at all. But instead, that's what they do. They fly all around the world and fundraise for awareness for this, for mental health. And it was just, I was so excited to sit and meet with them because their vision of what they want this world to be is so aligned with what I want this world to be. And the thought of being able to do it with partners like them was just incredible and humbling. And I was really in awe. I think I must have spoke like a mile a minute, and I don't think I shut up the entire conversation. I was just so excited. I watched Dragon's Den my whole life. Like, of course I'm going to be excited to meet this gentleman. I mean, and his wife is such a powerhouse. She does the fundraising. Like, she is like boots on the ground, kicking in the doors, taking the names, getting the money for the charities. Like, she knows how to do it. And she is a powerhouse woman, seriously. And she's a tiny little peanut too. Mm-hmm. She's incredible. So when Michael introduced us, last week, we've been talking, and I'm going to be meeting with them in Dallas in a couple weeks. And it's just this really cool experience. I don't know what to expect. I don't know where it's going. I just know I'm just trying to help in any way I can. And if that means getting help for their foundation, I'm excited as well.
At what point did Jim say he was going to write your foreword?
He said to me, well, what had happened was Michael had brought it up to me. He's like, I think I can get Jim, to take a look and possibly write it. He was in the RCMP. He really, cares about what you guys are talking about and the mental health aspect of it. And so he just kind of said to me, Jim's like, yeah, I'll read it. Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. No problem. So now I'm just kind of waiting for Jim to finally read it and write it. And I just said, well, I want to donate proceeds from this book to your foundation. And they were just really pumped on that. And I said, if this can be in any way used as a tool at all to help anybody, please use it, do what you want with it. Just let me know what you need and I'll be there. So that's what our hope is from this book, is that it not only gives resources, because inside the book it has resources, charities that we work with that are great, some tips and tricks that I know have worked for me, that I just, hey, I'm willing to offer up anything, even if it doesn't work for you, give it a shot. If it changes and helps you at all, then great, I've done my job. If it saves one life, I'm good with that.
So your memoir is called
Brass and Unity. Yeah.
When is it expected to launch?
We're hoping for September, but there's some things up in the air, but we're hoping for September right now, but we'll see. There'll be an audiobook. There'll be,
I love audiobooks.
Yeah, I might actually be recording it. So that should be interesting. You'll get to hear more of this voice.
No, you have a great voice for podcasts and
Thank
audio.
you.
I'm going to be the first. Okay, maybe not the first, but among the first to read your book, your memoir. So far in this conversation, I have been sitting just really entranced the whole time. I've found myself like almost having to remind myself, like, okay, time for the next question, because
I know, I'm sorry, I have a habit.
All
I have a
day,
habit of doing that.
But now we are nearing the
yes.
end. I always, not always, but this is a question that I like to end on. And that is, if you could go back and talk to that 18-year-old version of you before you enlisted in the military, what would you say to her?
Hold on tight. Just hold on tight, because you have no idea what's coming for you, kid.
Anything
I wouldn't
encouraging?
change. No, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a single thing.
So what about a message that you would have for somebody in a similar position, or the vets out there coming home?
Just keep hope. Reach out. Reach out. The first step needs to be to reach out. If you're not ready to reach out, send an anonymous email. Call the suicide hotline. It's anonymous. You don't have to leave your name. Just don't think that suicide is the only option. It's not the last resort. There's so many more options. If you're looking for resources and you can't find them, contact us. We'll find them for you. If you're local, there's a ton of places around here in British Columbia, that do tons of work. Edmonton, there's tons all across the country, especially in the United States. There's plenty of resources. If you can't find them, we will help you find them. But if you feel like suicide is the only option for you at that time, you need to call the hotline. You need to call the suicide hotline. We have all the resources at brassandunity.com. It's anonymous. There's no shame. Reach out, because that is the only thing that you can do to better or save your life. You have to be the first step in that, and know that it can be a lot better than what you're going through. It can be. You may not think it right now, but it can be. I promise.
It sounds like part of that message was geared towards the version of you who came really close to ending her own life.
Yeah.
And to imagine all the things that
go through your head while that's happening is...
Right. But then all the things you went on to do and the purpose that you were able to find, and how that could have not been the case had you made a different decision.
No, absolutely. You hope that your life amounts to something, and that you leave the mark on this world that you envision to leave. And looking back and thinking now that might have been my mark, and the end of my story is nothing I want for anybody in this world. The thought of not having, done the things I've done the past 10 years, have my son, my wedding, my husband, the support I have, the team that I have.
And all the things to come.
All the things.
Continuing to raise awareness.
Yes, that's all I want. Raise awareness. Suicide does not have to be the option.
And the changes, a whole lifetime ahead of the change that you can potentially be making.
That's the goal. That's what we want.
I know you said earlier that you don't feel like you're killing it.
No. I think every day is different.
I really think you are, just by virtue of example and the fact that you're sitting here and everything that you represent and all the things that you've done. It makes me so proud.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. That's incredible. Thank you.
Not just knowing someone like you, but just knowing that the idea of somebody like you exists.
I think it might have been the kindest thing somebody's ever said to me. Wow, thank you so much.
No, really, I mean.
No, but it's a far cry from what I ever thought I would be the example of. I'll be honest. Thank you, though. That's really sweet of you. I appreciate that. Well, you're giving platforms to people like us to tell our stories, and then one day hopefully have the impact. And if we didn't have people like you willing to tell the stories and have us on, then people like you, Joe Rogan, Jocko, those people who are willing to have veterans on, the veteran podcast, literally all of those podcasts that are out there that are veteran based, or they're the only people that are willing to really spread our voice. And when there's people like you that aren't in that space, that are, getting the rest of the world who aren't necessarily listening to Rogan or things like that, when you give us that chance, we will make an impact because of people like you. So thank you for the opportunity.
I feel a little strange. I feel like we're just, but yeah.
It's true.
The
You and I have met.
compliments you, though, you need to take and not give them back, because
no, I'm not giving them back. But podcasts are great. Podcasts are great because not a lot of people. It's new because all of this new podcast realm is so kind of up in the air still. And when there's certain people that give voices, not a lot do. Not a lot give a lot of voices to veterans. So when I say, and I group you in that grouping, I mean it, because not a lot of people would necessarily have me on to talk about fashion or to talk about the veteran aspect. It would only be one thing that I do. And so to have somebody be willing to talk about the whole experience,
right,
and show the whole thing is great. It's really great.
Your story and its fullness makes this platform at the very least.
We're hopeful.
And I feel like it's way more compelling if I'm able to understand
Absolutely.
you as a person. And in this short amount of time that we've had together, I know I've barely just scraped the surface, but thank you so much for giving me what you have. And I look forward to reading your book when it comes out.
I look forward to getting it to you when it comes out.
We'll be promoting it on Behind the Grind, so everybody listening will also be notified.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll be donating a massive portion of those proceeds. So every book that sells will go to a different organization, KMH, Honor House, all these different amazing foundations, TWS, Vets Canada, Kelsi Sheren's foundation, and we'll be doing amazing work with a lot of these people. So we're great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think that's it.
Well done, team.
Yay.